Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar. My name is Jill Buck. I'm the founder and CEO of the Go Green Initiative. We are proud to be in partnership with the National School Boards Association to bring you these monthly webinars on two topics that we're covering thanks to a great EPA grant that we received. We're working to improve indoor air quality in schools across the country, and we're trying to do that in an energy efficient way. And so our monthly webinars sometimes touch only on indoor air quality, sometimes they cover energy efficiency, sometimes both. But today we're really going to be talking most about energy efficiency. I want to let you know a couple of logistics. This is a Zoom webinar, so we won't see everybody's face on the screen, just our panelists. If you have a question down in the toolbar for your Zoom, you'll see a Q&A button. That's where you can put your questions, and we will get to those at the end of our panelists' presentation. Also, if you are working towards a Magna Award with the National School Boards Association, at the end of this presentation, I'll give you a QR code to take a quick survey that will help you earn a certificate of completion for this webinar that you can apply towards points for the Magna Award. I'm really pleased today to bring a good friend back into the fold. Roger Silveira is someone that I've known for a few years, and he is a former facilities director for a school district. I'll let him tell you all about it, but he knows what he's talking about. He's going to be talking about how to help school districts contend with runaway energy costs. And I know that every school district in the country is trying to grapple with rising energy prices and how to deal with that. So I'm going to share his slides. And Roger, the floor is yours, sir.
Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Roger Silveira. I am the Vice President of Intergenius, and we are a startup company that has a heavy focus on energy savings for schools. A little bit about my background. I've been a director of facilities for over 12 years. I've been in the trades and building homes and commercial buildings for about 30 odd years, with a heavy focus on facilities. Um, I got really involved with air quality, and I started a website called We Need Fresh Air back in 2019. Next slide, please. So back in 2019, I started a website called We Need Fresh Air with the focus on educating school districts and anybody that want to learn a little bit more about fresh air in classrooms and schools. And that got started actually from back in 2017. In 2017, I started working at a fairly large school district, and one of the first tasks there I walked into was triaging a sick building. So we had a cluster of classrooms with a few teachers that were sick. And while interviewing some of the teachers, one of the teachers was in tears about how she's felt in this building for the past few years and how her health was deteriorating. She was drinking 6 cups of coffee a day. Uh, it was pretty eye-opening to just sit her and listen to her and what she was feeling. And upon looking into the situation, we found that entire building had the fresh air intakes cut off. So she was living in a space with 30 kids a day with zero fresh air, no operable windows, and her door opened into a hallway. So she literally had no fresh air whatsoever for a few years. And that led to some pretty severe symptoms. And that kind of what launched my obsession with fresh air and getting into starting a website. And then that got me involved with legislators to look into getting CO2 monitors into classrooms. And a CO2 monitor is a proxy for ventilation. The amount of fresh air in a classroom can be measured by how much CO2 the occupants put out versus the amount of fresh air in the space. And so CO2 became my canary in the coal mine to let people know if that room had enough fresh air and good air quality. Next slide, please. And so I spent some time with Cash and some legislators and lobbyists here in California, the Utilities Commission, UC Davis, and partnerships we had. And we during COVID, we were able to get CO2 monitoring as a requirement in every classroom. So every classroom built or modernized now in California is required to have a CO2 monitor. And then we worked with the state to also produce some legislation called AB 841, CalShape, and that provided I think about $700 million to help school districts improve ventilation uh, uh, and install CO2 monitors in every classroom. So they got full assessments, they got repairs made, um, and they got CO2 monitors for classrooms as part of a grant. Next slide, please. So back to the importance of indoor air quality. As part of my obsession with indoor air quality and not just triaging sick buildings, I started looking at academic performance and quickly realized that, we had a lot of dysfunctional spaces in our district, and dysfunctional spaces lower academic performance. It lowers your test scores by about 10%. And then health and attendance. Here in California, I'm not sure about other states, but a lot of our districts are funded by ADA, average daily attendance. So every day a child misses a school is money that the school loses out. And for example, that district I was working in back in 2017, every day a student missed was $60 that district missed out on. And so through research and reading a lot of PubMed and a lot of documentation, I figured out that we were losing about $6 million a year in absences just based on how many days kids were missing from influenza alone. So that just kind of led to more legislation and more work. Uh, and realizing how poorly vented our spaces were, and how important the CO2 monitor was to make sure that our spaces were ventilated. Next slide, please. And so as we transition out of COVID, as important as air quality was, I started looking at the relationship between air quality and energy. And in a lot of the assessments, we were looking at the ventilation rate, and the readings from the CO2 monitor started to kind of show up. And I started to realize, hey, we've improved air quality significantly, but we're also, in many cases now, over-ventilating classes. So, and when we're over-ventilating classes, it comes with a massive energy penalty. And so getting that number right was crucial. You want to have good air quality, but you also don't want to overventilate. And then when you're overventilating, you're bringing a lot of outside air in, and you have to condition that outside air. So if it's really hot, you have to cool that air, and if it's really, really cold in the morning, you also have to warm that air. So that does come with a massive energy penalty when you don't get the formula just right. And we've implemented MERV 13 filters to help with the filtration, to improve the air quality. But as we transition out of COVID and budgets get tight, energy efficiency starts to become more and more important. Next slide, please. And so know exactly where we stand. Part of the work we do at Intergenius is knowing where you are. We benchmark, for example, regionally. In California, we have a pretty unique climate. You can be really cold and you can be in a desert, all within a few hours of each other. And so when we do analysis for school districts, we look at regional. So we compare you to your neighbors, less to your state and less nationally, but more to your neighbors. We do carbon footprint calculations. So when school districts, for example, want to know what their carbon footprint is based on their utility spend, how much gas or electricity they're using, we calculate that for them. And then we reconcile their solar production versus what they're actually um, not just production, but how it reconciles against their bill to make sure that they're getting the maximum effort from their production. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that we've noticed in the analysis over the past 6 months is some runaway energy costs. And as we benchmark and we trend 5-year trends, we're seeing a pretty alarming trend. In the past 24 months, rates have gone anywhere up from 35 to 40, 45, 50%. So we're seeing a massive increase in utility spend. And here in California, utilities are the second largest line item in a budget. Salaries and benefits are first, and then second largest line item is energy. And most districts here, it's anywhere from between 5 and 6% of their entire budget is just utilities. So it's started to become very impactful in their operation. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a real life example of a school district here in California, Morgan Hill. And you can see their budget took a massive hit from 24 to 25. Their budget went up doubled. Their utilities doubled in a single fiscal year. And so as budgets tighten, as COVID money is gone and ESSER monies are gone, they're having to just rely on local funding. And this is devastating when their utility goes up 1.3 million in a single fiscal year that they're not expecting. So it devastates, and this is a smaller urban, small rural district, so it's pretty devastating. That's a big chunk of their budget. Next slide. So as InterGenius, we're a new startup company and with a heavy focus on energy. And what makes us different than your typical ESCOs, and an ESCO an ESCO is a company that focuses heavily on energy savings, but through projects. So, for example, an ESCO will come in and install solar for you. They'll install HVAC systems and lighting, and they do large scale projects with a focus on saving energy through construction and projects. We take a different approach. We know budgets are tight, and so we focus first on analyzing your data. We crunch large amounts of data, 15-minute interval data, trend line, 5-year trends, and we look for any opportunities inside of that analysis to help produce savings. So it makes it a little bit different than your ESCOs. We don't sell equipment, we sell savings. The next slide. And so how do we help school districts save money? Um, we recover through the analysis. We recover any anomalies within billing. There are meter anomalies. There are calculations, there are rate structures that can be improved. There are quite a few different things within the billing that we can look at to improve operationally, and all without requiring capital improvements. Next slide. So we consider ourselves as energy management as a service. So we would do what a typical energy manager does, but at a much higher level. We focus primarily on data analysis. We crunch large amounts of data, and that data is what helps us make informed decisions for districts and help them prioritize what needs to be focused on first. Next slide. So how our analysis works. So we pull in 5 years worth of data. We reach out to the utility or we pull it ourselves, and we get all of the utility data, everything we can get, gas, electric, for 5 years, time of use. We look at the agreements, the service agreements. We look at time of use, demand charges. We look at quite a few different things. And then that also produces, the audit will also produce some recovery because we tend to find some anomalies. And I'll give you an example. We're working with a school district now. We found a couple of their NEM meters weren't connected they're connected to the grid, but they weren't programmed correctly. So the district isn't capturing the solar it's producing. So it's producing lots of solar. It's just not being caught by the NIM meter. And so, looking at each service agreement, each channel, the meters have different channels. A NIM meter will have 2 different channels in and out. And so making sure all of those things are working in conjunction with the utility production helps produce the most amount of savings. And then we also look at schedules. We'll get more to that. Next slide, please. And we look at optimizing EMS systems. So a big part of your savings can be done through just scheduling. And so we develop algorithms to mitigate demand charges, because if you start all of your equipment at 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll typically create a big spike, and some utilities charge you based on that demand spike. And so we create schedules that stagger equipment starts that help you kind of mitigate some of the demand charges. And then we pre-cool buildings in the afternoon, readjust thermostats in the afternoon to kind of mitigate some of the time of use. Here in California, time of use is getting to be very painful for us. We produce a tremendous amount of solar here, and the rate structures have changed. So the time of use now, the highest, most expensive power now is between 4 and 9 p.m. And we're running after school programs now until 6 and 7 p.m. So it's really difficult just to turn the school off. And so we have to develop strategies to kind of mitigate some of that very expensive energy after 4 p.m. And the way we do that is through controls and optimizing your control systems and capturing every holiday, every day off, every half day. We try to capture every little bit we can squeeze out just through optimization of your systems. And then we provide very graphic, detailed data visualization for CBOs, for the chief business officer, for superintendents, for the finance managers, so they can actually see visually where their expenditures are going, what schools have the highest use, which ones have the highest expend, year over year increases based. So we provide a tremendous amount of visual data for schools to be able to understand exactly what's going on with their utility and be able to make more informed decisions. If you're going to invest capital dollars, you want to look at which school has the most demand or the most usage, and kind of focus your what capital you do have available to run those projects that produce the biggest result towards your general fund, and that's kind of provide some general fund relief. And the data visualization is really easy for people to digest. We try not to make complex graphs that only engineers can read. We make graphs that the average person can read, and that's kind of what distinguishes us from some of our competitors. Is we cater our data so that average person can digest it and doesn't have to be an engineer to read all the graphing. Next slide, please. And so where does the savings come from? Bill recovery is one that we find quite a bit through meter anomalies. We find quite a few of those. We find meters that just have been there for many years, but they're canceled. Nobody's using them, and you're paying a monthly fee for them, for example. The solar isn't being captured correctly. You're on the wrong multiplier. You're on the wrong tariff. So those generate some savings and actual returns from the utility. And then the rate optimization. We make sure that all of these solar meters are aggregated correctly. So you may have a site that has 2 or 3 meters, for example, but you only have NEM on one meter, so your overproduction is going back to the utility. But that particular site may have 2 other meters that are drawing. So for example, you may be selling back to the utility at 8 cents a kilowatt hour, but the other 2 meters are on the same property are buying it back at 27 cents. And so how do we aggregate those meters and save the district some money? So we look at aggregation, schedule optimization, and then we look at demand reduction. So we develop algorithms to put into your controls to mitigate demand charges by staggering equipment. We don't want to start the entire place all at once at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning, because that creates a giant spike and it doesn't help your overall utility. So we look at staggering to help that. And then we align your meters, we align your solar production with your actual billing to make sure that you're capturing every penny. And then scheduling, and we look at your ventilation rates. If you have CO2 monitoring, we check all the CO2 levels to make sure that one, your air quality is in the range it should be, but you're not over ventilating spaces, because it does cost quite a bit. And then we'll leverage demand ventilation wherever we can, especially in the afternoons. So it's quite a bit of work to get it all optimized perfectly, but there is a large amount of savings available if you put the effort in. Next slide, please. And the impact and value. So right now, as we're looking at districts, just off the top, we're seeing anywhere from 10 to 25% reduction in just the first year alone by just smoothing out operations. We're seeing better air quality and ongoing savings. And the first year is usually the pretty big year because we get a lot of recovery. And then we try to, by year three, we pretty much squeezed every penny we can out of operations and the utility. And usually by year three, we're looking more of how do we keep providing the data and ensure that you don't have any issues moving forward. But the recovery and the savings kind of plateaus right around year three. And why it works, it works because we have quite a bit of experience. I've been doing it since 2017, and I've seen levels of dysfunction that it blow your mind. And it's pretty much consistent across almost every district that we're working with. And another example, I had a gas meter at a high school district that had been operating at 1,000% more than its peers for over 7 years, costing that one district about $500,000 a year in additional charges. And this went on for over 7 years, as far back as I can pull data. Once we fixed the multiplier, their bill dropped from 220,000 to about 20,000 a month. So we find these anomalies everywhere. So that's kind of what we do. And then our role is independent energy manager. We do it as a service. And so if you can't afford a full-time energy manager, we become your energy manager as a service at a fraction of the cost of having a full-time employee. We don't sell equipment. We don't require capital. We're not dependent on capital investments. And we align with the district. We align with districts and their savings models and how do we help them out. And so the bottom line is we turn utility data into budget savings. That's what we do. We take massive amounts of data and we come up with a plan to save you the most amount of money as humanly possible at the lowest cost. Okay, next slide. Well, this is our kind of our Q&A. If you have any questions, there was one thing I was going to cover, and I just drew a blank. Sorry.
No worries at all, Roger. I'm going to cover a couple of other quick slides real quick. If anybody has questions, make sure that you put those in the Q&A section. But there's a couple of things I want to go over real quick. If you do want to earn Magna Award points for attending this webinar, please click on that QR code and fill out the survey. You'll get a certificate emailed to you right away. We're also going to put the link to this survey in the video description section underneath the recorded webinar on YouTube. And everybody who registered for this webinar will get an email tomorrow with all of the links to the slides, links to this survey, links to the recorded webinar in case you want to share it with others. And then lastly, I'd like to give everybody a chance to register for our next monthly webinar, which will be on May 12th, same time, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking with Ken Wirtz. He is the executive director of the National School Plant Management Association. He was a facilities director and plant manager for a long time himself before he started in this role. And he's going to be talking to us about what folks who are plant managers and facility directors need in order to manage indoor air quality. And so that's going to be a great webinar. That QR code will take you to the registration link if you would like that. I'm going to stop sharing now and bring it back. Let's see if we have any questions. Anybody have any questions for Roger? I'm looking in the Q&A section now, and I am not seeing any questions. Um,
While you wait, I wanted to kind of cover some
mhm,
funding, some
please
funding
do.
opportunities. So, I mean, here in California, the utilities have a on-bill financing program. So, if you wanted to upgrade your equipment, you can actually apply through the utility for what they call on-bill financing. And they'll actually fund your projects to replace your equipment, and they'll keep the savings until the project is paid for. So you won't notice your bill go down, but you'll get brand new equipment with warranties and improved air quality and operations. And not every across the country, not every utility offers them, but you can check there first. There are private companies, finance vehicles that will do this similar, the same. They'll take your savings and they'll fund your projects for you. So your bill stays the same, but again, you get new equipment. And in areas that don't have a lot of bond money or means of replacing large capital projects like HVAC and lighting, there are different vehicles available to help kind of replace some of that equipment that is costing you a lot of money and air quality as well.
That's a great point, Roger. And I think, I just came back from the National School Boards Association annual conference, and we talked to a lot of school districts who are trying to manage indoor air quality in an energy efficient way. And we did hear that several of them worked with their utilities for these kinds of incentives that the utilities and their regulators required the utilities to provide these kinds of services, whether it's auditing services or actual rebates. There's a lot of opportunities depending on the state that you live in and what the regulators require utilities to provide for commercial accounts like schools. Roger, one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, have you ever seen a situation where, and you mentioned it, but that school districts actually get money back because they were erroneously charged, and they just didn't know it by their utility? Tell us a little bit more about some of the savings you've been able to help school districts, money they've been able to get back just simply because they didn't realize they'd been overcharged.
Yeah, one of the biggest ones I've had so far was about a million. It was actually a million two. We were able to go back 5 years, reconcile with the utility, and we were able to recover a million two. And then not only recover a million two, we were able to lower their annual expenditures by 700,000 a year. I'm sorry, a year. And so the other school district I just mentioned, we were, after an audit there, we found one dysfunctional meter. We were able to recover almost 2 million in just gas charges alone over a 3 year period. A lot of the utilities have a statute of limitations, so you can only go back 3 years. But it's, you get the recovery, and then you get this, once you fix the dysfunction, you get the savings on top of the recovery. So you kind of win both directions. So you get the long-term savings from fixing the dysfunction. And most of the utilities they're large companies with a lot of moving parts and a lot of things, and humans make errors, and a, a decimal in the wrong spot could mean a multiplier of 10 versus a multiplier of 1. And that's what happened to this 1 meter. It had a decimal in the wrong spot and created a multiplier of 10 versus a multiplier of 1. So it was charging this 1 meter 1,000% more than its peers, and it took a few weeks of working with the utility to get them to fix it. But once they fix it, that dropped the utility by over 500,000 a year, plus produced almost 2 million in gas credits.
I know that some of our listeners are school board members, and they may be wondering, is my facilities director trained to do this? I mean, is this something that we should be able to do in-house? When you were a facilities director, I know there are state conferences for that, but is this an expectation that districts should have that their facilities director can do this in-house, or is this really something much more specialized?
I mean, I took a massive interest in it, and when I came to the district in 2017, and I immediately started trending the data myself, which most people don't have the bandwidth to do, but I immediately pulled billing, and fortunately accounting had a lot of the information on a spreadsheet, so it was easy to trend, which doesn't happen very often. And once I pulled a 10-year trend is what really opened my eyes. And then my business partner is actually an analyst, and that's how we got together. He's an analyst, so he takes large volumes of data and he digests it into simple graphs. And it was with his help for example, one of the digital we're working with, he has 5,000 lines on a spreadsheet with across 30 cells. So it is thousands of lines of cells in a spreadsheet. And then to be able to digest that manually takes hours and hours and hours. My first time doing it manually took me over 100 hours. He now does it quickly with our software we have.
Mm-hmm.
But your typical director is not going to have the bandwidth to pull every bill in, reconcile it, look for it. It's just too much data for one person that doesn't have one. Most of the directors are busy people.
Mm-hmm.
They have a hard enough time putting the fires out they're dealing with, let alone set aside hundreds of hours to reconcile billing. And most of them are required. The utility bill comes in and you just sign it and approve it. Well, they have no baseline to even compare it to, and so
Mm-hmm.
they just not by fault they're just required to blindly sign the bill that they have no way of reconciling on their own. Unless you're pulling all of that data in, reconciling it, comparing it to your peers and benchmark it, you really have no way to know if that bill you're paying is actually the right number or not. It's almost
Another
impossible.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge amount of work. And facilities directors are busy people, just with the day to day. I've got another question for you. Do you guys have a mechanism, I'm sure you probably do, of measuring energy consumption by, like, say, square foot, so that if you're looking at a portfolio of schools that might include, elementary, middle, and high schools, I mean, everybody's going to say, well, of course, the high schools are going to use more energy, but maybe they're using much, much more energy if you look at maybe per capita or per square foot. Do you have a way of comparing apples and apples when it comes to school buildings of different sizes?
Yeah, so part of our final report does break it down by attendance. So we break it down by school attendance and we break it down by square footage. So we compare all of that in our final. We don't just look at the consumption data and the dollars. We
Mhm.
look at cost per square foot, cost per student, age of building. We tie everything back to a single line drawing, so you know what meter feeds your buildings. So when we produce a report, it's very detailed. Um, and we like to benchmark against your peers more than nationally or statewide, because climate's changed from region to region. So the most accurate way to compare it for us is as to your peers. We do
Mhm.
that through, like you said, square footage, and through students. So we look at student cost, and then we calculate the carbon footprint based by student, cost by square foot, cost by school. So you can see, school to school, what your carbon footprint is by student, school to school. If that's something you're interested in, we do that as well.
And
Um,
when you do that, when you guys do the calculations for carbon footprint, is that based upon the actual energy portfolio of the local utility? Like, for instance, PG&E may have a slightly different source than SDG&E. How do you determine the carbon footprint for the energy consumption by area?
so we try to find the local, because every provider has a formula they use, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where they purchase, Sound Clean Energy, for example, has a percentage of what their. So we pulled their data in, and then we adjust it based on where the utility is and what information we can gather from them personally. So from that company.
Mm-hmm.
So if they publish that information, we use that information to run our calculations. And we don't use national or state. We try to look for regional data from the actual utility in that area.
That's awesome. Now, before we started the webinar, sometimes I feel like we should let people in earlier because we were having a great conversation about how some of the things that you uncover with this data helps you make recommendations to school districts about maybe changing their equipment, but maybe just running it smarter. And how does that oftentimes help improve indoor air quality?
And so, I mean, most buildings, commercial, rely heavily on HVAC, air conditioning equipment, heating, HVAC systems to provide fresh air. I mean, it is a code requirement that fresh air comes in during the occupied period. And in a typical classroom, actually requires 15 CFM per student. So if you get 30 kids in the classroom and a teacher, you're looking at 450 CFM. That's a lot of air moving to that space that you have to condition. And if your equipment's dysfunctional, you're not getting the right amount of air coming in. And especially here where economizers, we get mild evenings and cool mornings, and we rely heavily on those economizers to provide, conditioning, free conditioning basically. Those things become dysfunctional, and sometimes when they become dysfunctional, they don't just stop providing free conditioning, they actually shut the entire air off. And so the mechanical system is cooling. So, the comfort wise, you feel the heating and cooling, but there's no fresh air coming in. And that's where the CO2 monitors come in handy. And that's kind of why I push so hard to get them as a state requirement, because that's your canary in coal mine. That's how you know if that space has ventilation or doesn't. Because ventilation is one of the key drivers of air quality is good ventilation. You want that outside air coming in and purging out the VOCs, and purging out the CO2. I mean, CO2 on its own is we exhale 1.3 pounds of it a day. So on its own, it's not toxic, but in heavy concentrations, with long-term exposure, it does start to have negative impacts on your health. and then all the VOCs build up. If you're not purging, you get all those VOCs building up in those classrooms. And today everything's made of plastic and formica and nylon and all those things emit gas. Even though we're trying to buy low VOC products, or they're still emitting, and we want to have that purging effect. And the equipment's old and dysfunctional, you're not getting that purging effect, and you're losing a lot in energy.
Yeah, and a lot of folks who haven't been in a school in a while may forget how densely populated, classrooms are. It's not like an office building where you've got some elbow room. I mean, you're talking about 30 plus students sometimes in a fairly small space. So the CO2 can build up quite rapidly. Talk to us a little bit about what's unique about school, occupancy
Yeah.
that
So,
it
so
makes a difference.
your typical classroom here is anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. So you get 30 to 35 kids in a classroom that's, 1,000 square feet, and a teacher, that CO2 just spikes up almost within a few minutes. So if you're not, if that fan's not running with the ventilation going, you can quickly get into 3,000. I mean, I've seen classrooms at 3,000 parts per million, 3,500 parts per million, most of the day because they have zero ventilation.
Mhm.
And that becomes real problematic long term. One day is not the end of the world, but you start to, daily exposure to that. And students, especially in high school, elementary is probably worse than high school because the high school kids, the bell rings every 45 minutes and they kind of run around.
Mhm.
Um, but if you have all the classrooms dysfunctional, it's the same. But elementary students typically are in the same classroom all day. They don't move.
Mhm.
So they have the most exposure. They're the youngest, most vulnerable, and they have no way to get out. So the bell rings for a break, but they're in that classroom all day long.
Yeah.
It becomes more important at the younger ages.
So I want to get your bottom line perspective on, the real question that we're trying to answer with this EPA grant, and that is, can you have very healthy indoor air quality that actually benefits the students and their health and their learning, and be energy efficient at the same time?
Yes, and so if you have good equipment, the first thing I recommend is the MERV 13 filter, especially if your equipment can handle it. MERV 13 filters capture a little over 90% of everything floating in the air. So you combine the filtration of a MERV 13 plus the purging effect of good ventilation, and that's your secret sauce. That's your magic to keeping good air quality. Those two things are probably the most important things you can do. Some of the smaller HEPA filters you see that people put in classrooms. While they work good for a room with a couple of people, they're not quite large enough to really make a big difference in a classroom with 35 kids. They just don't have enough volume of moving air, so it takes quite a large those filter to run that much air through it. So I don't find those small filters that effective. I focus on purging, get the ventilation rate up, and the MERV 13 filtering. If you can do those two things, they're probably the biggest thing you can do for your school. That doesn't cost you any more money. Just to make sure that your fans are running, the ventilation's on, and you run a MERV 13 filter. That alone will solve 90% of your problems. And those little filters, I'm just analyzing a district right now that bought those portable filters during COVID. They put one in every classroom. Here we are 4 years later. They're still all plugged in. I just did a audit. More than more than a quarter of them are still plugged in running 24/7. This one district alone, I have some crazy pictures. The filters never been changed in them. And so these things are drawing huge amounts of power, costing this district about 27,000 a year just from those filters that no one unplugged and put away during COVID. They're just still sitting there running in the background. And so there's opportunities everywhere that we can find. Look for equipment like that. Look for schedule opportunities. So there's quite a bit you can do right now to improve air quality and savings without having to spend a lot of money.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Roger, for being with us. This was a great conversation. We're going to put this up on YouTube. It'll be up tomorrow. Everybody who registered will get an email with the link to that recorded conversation. You'll also get links to the slides, a registration for our next monthly webinar, and a link to the survey if you're trying to earn Magna Award points, that you can take that survey and get a certificate of completion. So I want to thank you, Roger, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Have a wonderful day and do something in your life to go green.